In this lecture, we will talk about some of the reader-oriented literary approaches that are out there, starting with a approach called Deconstructionism, also called post-structuralism. Goes back to a man by the name of Jacques Derrida, a Frenchman. He was a leading proponent of this view. And he emphasized that we can never determine what a text originally meant. The only thing you can really determine is what the text means to you. In other words, it's a form of hermeneutical nihilism. And it was very popular in modern English literary departments, so around 1990 and on. Although since his death in 2004, this movement has declined considerably. To deconstruct a discourse is to show how it undermines the philosophy it asserts, or the hierarchical oppositions on which it relies. For example, in the book of Job, Job tries to explain why the righteous suffer. At least that's what it seemed to be doing. But when you actually examine the book of Job, it doesn't really explain why the righteous suffer. And so it deconstructs. But having deconstructed the text, you can go on to say, but let me tell you my feelings about why the righteous suffer, or about how the righteous suffer. And that's the sort of thing that deconstructionists would do. Again, it's declined considerably since the death of Derrida, in part because deconstructionism itself deconstructs. Derrida complained that people misunderstood him. But his own teaching is that you can never really understand what a text is trying to say. And so if people misunderstood him, well, that's what you would expect from his own theory. And yet he couldn't live with his own theory, and he complained when people misunderstood his writings. Thus, it's an approach that itself deconstructs. And indeed, if you were to apply it consistently, it would undermine civil society and religion. You could never know, according to Derrida, what a law meant, or what a contract meant, or what a set of instructions meant. Though I would have to comment that this approach is pretty common in the law already, where especially political liberals on the Supreme Court tend to feel free to reinterpret the words of the Constitution at whim. That's, pardon the political comment here. And it obviously destroys a Bible-based religion. So if you can never really know what a text meant, then you can never really have a religion based on the Bible. So enough about deconstructionism. Let me move on to another approach called liberation theology approaches, or Marxist literary criticism. Marxist literary criticism views the Bible as a paradigm for liberation from present-day oppression. And liberation theology reads the Bible under the categories of Marxist literary analysis. Marxism likes to analyze things by class struggles, dividing people up into the oppressed and oppressors, and looking at economic analysis of the means of production. And Marxist literary critics will look at the Bible using exactly those kinds of analysis. Now, there's a particular kind of Marxist literary criticism, which is feminist literary criticism. And again, this is very popular in the English departments and the universities today. It reads the Bible in the light of present-day oppressive structures of patriarchal society. Again, kind of a Marxist analysis where the oppressors will tend to be men and the oppressed will tend to be women. And again, it wears its ideological presuppositions on its sleeves. It assumes the correctness of feminist ideology and it analyzes things in the light of that ideology. Now, I should mention that there are different types of feminists that look at things in the Bible. There are the radical feminists who reject the Bible as hopelessly oppressive of women. But then there's liberal Christian feminists like Phyllis Tribble, who try to salvage what they can from the Bible. They reject some of the Bible's teaching if they deem it to be patriarchal, but then they point to more hopeful passages such as Galatians 3:28, that in Christ there's neither male nor female, as supportive of a more egalitarian approach to things. But then there's yet another kind of feminist approach, evangelical feminism. These refer to themselves as egalitarian Christians, and they would argue this, that you can have a high view of the Bible, but that is not inconsistent with holding to at least some tenets of feminism. They would also argue that the patriarchy in the Bible is descriptive of the culture of that time and is not necessarily prescriptive of what we must today always do. Indeed, they apply what is called a progressive hermeneutic. They would take the Bible's statements about women and apply them to that time and culture and setting, but argue that as we move closer to the end of the age, the eschaton, where there is neither male nor female, well, then some of those things are a part of the old creation order, and we should be moving ever gradually towards the new creation order, where there is no distinction between male and female. Now, among the proponents of evangelical feminism are Christians for Biblical Equality, an organization that you can search online and find more about. Certainly this approach is far better than either radical feminism, which rejects the Bible, and liberal Christian feminism, which accepts certain parts of the Bible but rejects other parts of the Bible. However, not all Christians, evangelical Christians, agree with this evangelical feminist approach. The opposite approach would be a complementarian approach defended by the Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood that says that the Bible does in fact teach distinctive roles for men and women in both the church and the family. It's beyond my preview here to hash out that particular debate. It's an important one for you to think about, but it does illustrate some of the various approaches that there are to analyzing the text. This then ends the critical methodologies lectures for this course.